the last few years, the Bruins prospect pool has been more punchline than pipeline. Like, we've heard the greatest hits. They can't develop. They can't draft. They don't have an eye for talent. They give up all their first-round picks. And it's true, but I won't bore you with it. I've talked about that plenty this summer. But now things are genuinely different, like very different with the outlook and the future of this hockey team based on their prospect pool. Now, the present doesn't look very good, but there will be a lot of ice time to go around for these young kids. And suddenly they have good young kids. The hockey writers, which I follow along with these prospect pools, the hockey writers have the Bruins as a top 20 prospect pool in the NHL this year. Some other outlets have them actually like knocking on the door of the top 10. That's a big, big jump. And look, when I say top 20, I'm sure there are some people who are like, oh, seriously? That's what we're pounding our chest over? A top 20 prospect pool in the NHL? Like there's 32 teams. Yeah, but out of the last few years, when we were talking about our teams being in the 30s for the prospect pool, to be top 20 is a big deal. It's not the 30s, man. There's a big difference between the teams in the 30s. They're pretty good. It's Tampa and Florida this year, and the teams that are in the top 20. And the Bruins, the last two seasons really, had prospect pools in the 30s and did not have a Stanley Cup contending team. And, in 23 they did, but I don't think anyone really thought in 22 they had a Stanley Cup contending team. They had a good team good enough to make the playoffs, but not a Stanley Cup contending team. And so when you're in that and you have the worst prospect pool in hockey, it's not a great outlook on your future. It really isn't. And there's finally something to look forward to. And the reason why the hockey writers and everybody else covering the sport are starting to buy into the Bruins prospect pool, the reason why is James Hagens. James Hagens, Will Zellers, Fraser Minten. Those three guys have changed everything. These were all guys that were not part of the picture last year and have now significantly elevated their future prospects. No pun intended. They are prospects who improve your future prospects. You get Zellers and Minten at the deadline, a couple of 2 trade deadline deals that I think Don Sweeney won. I think he nailed both those trades. Charlie Coyle, who's now on a different team than Colorado, you get Will Zellers in return, and you kind of have to eat the Casey Middlestat money. That's too bad. And Brandon Carlo, who wasn't doing much for this team, getting sent to Toronto, didn't do much for them, and you get one of Toronto's 2 actual prospects in return in Fraser Minten, a 20-year-old center who's got all kinds of upside. Like that was a big deal for Don Sweeney, man. And the other, I got to give some more credit to Don Sweeney. I know most people aren't because they're saying, oh, well, James Hagens, he fell into your lap. What are you going to do? But based on what we saw, the rumors that we heard, and specifically what we saw out of Long Island this week, I think we got to give Don Sweeney some credit there. He stuck to his guns. Like we knew the Islanders were making a real push to get James Hagens. That was the big rumor before the draft. They had the first overall pick, but they were trying to get into 7. It was kind of I think a lot of Islanders fans wouldn't have minded if they had like the 5th pick and could have taken Hagens, but instead they got the first pick. They had to take Matthew Schaefer. But he's the hometown kid, Long Island, once thought of as the top prospect in the draft. So, if they had the number 1 pick in December, it probably would have been James Hagens. And they were really they're pushing really hard. And now we know how hard they were pushing really up until the last second. This is a clip from a show called On the Island that the Islanders produced. And Matthew Darsh, New York's GM, was trying till the very last second to fleece the Bruins here.
For me now, I got 2 other first-round picks. You want to package something and get something else with those picks. Obviously my job is always to do my due diligence and talk to teams, talk to other GMs. Swings away.
He knows who you want to take, obviously. So. There it is.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Bye. They're taking the pick.
The Boston Bruins select from Boston College.
Well, we'll pick in at 6.
That is great dramatic hockey content right there, huh? How about like the 20 seconds he's on the phone just from to say, Sweens, how are you? that is classic hockey entertainment, man. Not much charisma going on in that room. But you could see, like right up till the end, they were putting together a deal. And we don't know exactly what the details are for what Matthew Darche was going to trade, but all that we heard leading up to the draft was the 2 picks that they had in the middle coming off the Noah Dobson trade, which was 16 and 17 in the first round, and JG Pageau, a soon-to-be 33-year-old JG Pageau. And you get picks 16 and 17 in a weak draft. And you might have had some future picks thrown in there, maybe. But as I've said, and as all these NHL people have said about the 26th draft, like all these teams are really wary of trading their first-round pick because you don't know how bad you're going to have to be. You might not have to be Chicago or San Jose bad. The Islanders weren't. They were pushing in the playoffs in April, and they got the number 1 pick in the draft. So the team that has literally made the example out of this, I don't think is trading their first-round pick next year. So if it's 16 and 17 and someone like JG Pageau, that was 1,000% the right move from Don Sweeney. And it shows, if nothing else, a little bit of commitment there. They have been so scared to commit to a player or a coach or a GM as an entire franchise. And I mean, commit before he does anything, I should say. And here they've committed to someone before he's done something for them and said, you know what? No, we got lucky to have James Higgins at number 7. We are going to stick to our guns for that. And that has significantly improved their prospect pool and their future outlook way more than 16 and 17 and JG Pageau would have. Okay. You've got young center depth now. Not only do you have Higgins playing at BC right now, but you've got Matthew Poitras and Fraser Minton ready to go. These guys played in the NHL last year. They looked somewhat impressive. And Matthew Poitras, you know, a lot of people are saying he's done, but he's 21, man. And not that long ago, 2 seasons ago, he was the future. He was the Bergeron replacement, so to speak. Like he has a lot of upside, and he's young and he's small. He's got to add some weight, and he's got to take on a full NHL season. But lest we forget why we were high on this kid 2 years ago. And the same goes for this other guy the hockey writers absolutely love. Everybody, when they're doing their write-up on this team for their prospect pool, is talking about Mason Lohrei. A guy a lot of Bruins fans are not wild about because we're seeing him develop in real time. Like we're seeing the development and all the ups and downs that come with that right in front of our face, man. Right in front of us. And it hasn't always been smooth. Of course it's not. Of course it's not always been smooth, but I love Mason Lohrei, man. And his upside for this team is tremendous. Like I think that's a guy who probably should be, he's a top 10 young defenseman in hockey, like a defenseman under 23. I think he's turning 23 this year. And I think he could be quarterbacking your power play this year. I really do. I think you're getting a second shot at Dougie Hamilton, who didn't turn out to be this great NHL player, but he was a pretty solid 2-way offensive upside defenseman for a long time in this league, and you gave up on him when he was an RFA. Don't do that with Mason Lohrei. With the way your team is right now, I think it's definitely worth a shot to see if he can quarterback a power play and what kind of offense he can bring you this year. And that's just, these are just the guys who are ready for the league right now. Poitras, Minton, Lohrei obviously played a lot. But don't be surprised if we see a guy like Donzel Chmelis, man. Another one signed as ELC last year, comes in Providence, 12 points in 6 AHL games. playing alongside Matthew Poitras, a little bit bigger than Poitras, so he can play on the wing. He's a center by trade. Don't be surprised if you see him at some point this season. And that's a kid who found his scoring touch at UMass last year, 33 points in 40 games, and then the 12-6 in the AHL. But he's known as like a good shutdown center, defensive center. Sidney Crosby really liked his shutdown center game at the World Juniors. And so those are the guys that you're talking about in the league right now. Like, you don't have a generational kind of talent yet, obviously. Nothing close to it. Donzel Chimelis isn't Connor McDavid. But for the first time in a while, you have 4 or 5 kids ready to slot in and play real minutes in the NHL. That's not something the Bruins have had in 20 years. And then you have some real hope for stars for the next guys. Hagens and Will Zellers leading the ECHL in goals and now playing in North Dakota. And whomever is taken with your first round pick this year. Guys who are a few years away from being a few years away could be real stars here. And here's what the hockey writers had to say. This is where it's key. After making 31 selections in the previous 6 NHL drafts, that's 5 a year, and none of them being near the top, only 5 of those being in the first 2 rounds, 3 firsts and 2 seconds. And that's where you get Johnny Beecher. The Boston Bruins made 7 full picks in the 2025 draft for just the second time since 2015. The lack of draft capital is bound to leave you near the bottom of a list like this, but their injury issues and a few savvy trade deadline moves have given them a good bit more talent with their first true top-end prospect in a decade with James Hagens. The first one since Pasternak, who more or less slotted in right away. Before that, you had Hamilton, you had Sagan out of the Toronto deals, and Phil Kessel before that, who gave you the other 2 draft picks, ironically enough. So you've still got your best prospect that you've had in a decade in James Hagens. And that changes the entire game for this. And where it all kind of comes together is your head coach. Again, I've been critical of the hire, but I did this in depth yesterday. You've got a coach who can develop young talent in Marco Sturm. He did it with LA. Quentin Byfield, Brant Clark, Adrian Kempe all had a ton of Marco Sturm in them. That doesn't sound good. He had his hands all over those guys' development. And that's a good team, a very good team in the Western Conference right now because of those 3 guys mainly. They've built it with a core group of kids. And Marco Sturm was all over that. He had his fingerprints all over the development of those guys. And so you bring in some guys who are ready to play in the NHL. You got some good long-term prospects, and you got a coach like Marco Sturm, and bam, you're all of a sudden starting to feel really, really good about your prospects. As good as you felt since watching Dougie Hamilton and Tyler Seguin come through the ranks. And I use that pretty liberally because Tyler Seguin was pretty much on the team the whole time. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. How excited are you about this Bruins prospect group? Do you really believe they're a top 20 prospect group in the league? And how does that make you feel differently about the team this year? Let me know in the comments section below. Then be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are so close to 4,000 subscribers, and we need your help in getting there. I'm your host, Cam Stewart. That's why it's called The Cam Show. Zach Burke keeps us on the air 5 days a week. Check out the other videos on the channel, talking Bruins every day. Bruins, Red Sox, Patriots, everything else going on in the world of Boston sports so that you don't have to listen to Sports Talk Radio.